I was so young when my dad died that I guess everybody thought that I would just get over it, right? Like I would just be able to move on past it.
Imagine losing your father at such a young age that it has a major impact on the rest of your life. My next guest talks about exactly that. Welcome back to season 4 of the podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Blackwood. As many of you know, I wrote my autobiography as a survivor of human trafficking. It's called Custom Justice, but if you didn't know, you do now. Keeping in line with that, this podcast has been dedicated to interviewing people who also wrote about their own experiences as trauma survivors and how they overcame the past. Stories of hope live here. As always, welcome back to the show. I have with me one incredible person yet again today. Her name is Stephanie Jordan. She is an author, a teacher, a speaker, and a mom to 5 kids. Oh my gosh, I had one. I can't imagine having 5. But one of my favorite details to learn about her is that she loves to ride her Harley Davidson Sportster 48 when she's got some time. And if you're only listening to the podcast instead of watching it over on YouTube, you can't see the absolute gorgeous hair on this woman. You guys got to check it out. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here too, because holy cow, you went through some stuff.
God knows
Yeah.
I don't handle being bored very well. So he keeps me on my toes.
I love it. He's good at that, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm a troublemaker if he doesn't have me like very consumed with crazy. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, 5 kids, you're definitely going to be
yes,
consumed by crazy all the time.
yes,
Wow.
yes. That's
So,
absolutely the truth.
one of my first questions I usually always ask has to do with where somebody grew up, where they're from, where they were born. You have an accent, so now we got to know more about it.
I am from the deep South, so I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and
Nice.
I grew up here. I've lived in the South forever. The only other place I've ever lived is New Orleans, which is just deeper South, but it's Cajun French, so it's a little bit different culture, but still deep South.
Very cool. So I've been to both places. I used to be a flight attendant and
Yeah.
I love New Orleans off season. Love it.
Oh, girl, New Orleans is like it has my heart. I love that
Oh,
town.
oh, and the history. Oh, it's just amazing. Oh, all right.
Yes, the food, the history, the culture, it's just everything is unique. Like there's no such thing as like cookie cutter when it comes to New Orleans.
Right. Absolutely. And you hit home with me when you mentioned the food because I've never again had jambalaya pizza, but oh my gosh, did I love it when I was there. It was amazing.
So good.
So now we got to get into some of the more difficult stuff to talk about real quick. We'll kind of breeze through it, but you went through a lot of stuff and it started when you were really, really young. So walk
Yes.
us through that a little bit. What all happened?
So, when I was 4, my dad died in a car accident, and my mom remarried 13 months later. And so those two situations were very, very complicated in their own ways, right? I was so young when my dad died that I guess everybody thought that I would just get over it, right? Like I would just be able to move on past it. But that's not how it worked for me. I was utterly devastated. And then my mom remarrying, um, we did not have a good relationship with our stepdad growing up. I think he wanted her, but not really us. But we all kind of came as a package deal. And so he was very jealous, and he had like my mom would be in there saying like the bedtime prayers with us, and he would come and interrupt them and ask when she was going to come back to the den, and just things like that. It was just very volatile in that upbringing, and it was very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. It's so hard to understand somebody being jealous of a child, though. I mean, this is somebody with some obvious psychological issues of their own. They're very needy. They're not very understanding. And he knew when he married your mom that you kids were part of the deal, and he still wasn't happy about it.
He's a lot older than my mom, and his kids are a lot older than us. And like my oldest stepbrother was out of the house before they even got married, like a lot older than us. So
Wow.
I think he kind of felt like he was having to start over in some
Yeah.
ways. I was 5 years old, right? I was like in kindergarten, or not even in kindergarten. And so I think I started kindergarten, or maybe I was finishing up kindergarten when they got married, because I went to first grade that next year. So
Mm.
um, I think he was out of that phase of life, so there could have been some resentments that he was having to start all over again when he had, teenage and grown children. Um, but there again, like, you're the adult, you pick that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This was the life you chose, buddy. Do
Yeah,
you think that having
exactly.
that not so great relationship with him bled over into your adult relationships later on?
Oh, absolutely. I totally was a codependent coming out of my childhood with codependent parents and the unhealthy relational dynamics that they had.
Wow.
Definitely.
Yeah, a lot of times that's exactly what happens. You have a bad relationship with one or both parents, and it does bleed over into other aspects of your life. It's hard to move
My,
beyond that kind of stuff sometimes, you know?
it
And
is. My mom actually told me in 2016, it was probably one of the biggest gut punches I've ever had, but she said that the only marital issues that they ever had was a blonde haired, blue eyed little girl.
ouch. Wow. Now, do you have a good relationship with your mom?
Yes, I do. But a lot is because I try and live in a place of forgiveness.
Mm,
My mom is so sweet. She's so gentle. She's a doormat, right?
yeah.
So that's part of it. And I came out with two pistols loaded, ready to fight the world from birth. So she didn't know what to do with my extremely aggressive and strong personality. She was just like, why can't you just play the game? Right? Why don't you just follow the rules and do what you're told? And I was like, what rules? I don't see any rules. And so that was probably a lot of the relational dynamic that made it complicated for us. But as far as who she is as a person, she's a precious lady, and she has loved us and taken care of us, and she's always been very gentle and kind. And when she said that comment, I don't think she really thought through what she was saying before it came out of her mouth. But that was a perfect summation of my childhood with them.
Wow.
Like, it really, really, it said everything in one very, very abrasive sentence. So um
You were the Hellraiser.
I was the hellraiser, but I was their scapegoat as well.
Mm, yeah.
It was my fault, and it wasn't my fault. None of it. I was a kid, you know.
Yeah.
It's not my responsibility to make their household anything. I was the child.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm so glad you recognize that. And you said she said this to you in 2016. So this was not that long after you had another very serious trauma that happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. What was that one?
So in 2014, in December 2014, my husband of 10 and a half years passed away. And I became a widow with 5 kids. So
Wow.
that was something else.
Man. So, how did having to go through all of this impact your life going forward? Did you have any kind of adapted behaviors? Did you have anything that you changed within yourself?
I would say D, all the above, right? So I guess one kind of blessing about my personality is that I'm quick on my feet and I love change. I did not love that change, and nor
Yeah.
was it expected. Like, we put the kids to bed, or he put the kids to bed that night, and then like within an hour and a half later, he was dead. I mean, it was lightning fast. Yes.
Oh
Like,
my
he
gosh.
was he was 38 years old. I was 37 years old. I knew nothing about heart issues.
Mm.
And he kept saying like his left arm was hurting, and he was just a very demonstrative person anyway. So like, he never said like, hey, this is really bad, like I think I'm dying, or hey, you need to call 911. Like, he never alerted me of anything. He just thought it was like gas bubbles, right? And so he just thought he was having like the worst case of indigestion of his life. And but he died of hypertension instead of high blood pressure.
Wow. This
Yeah.
is something that's going to be super traumatic for you, but also for the kids. 5 kids.
Oh yeah.
And you got to get through this as a family now, you know.
Yes.
So what helped you guys individually to be able to heal from this, be able to find ways to move on? Because you don't get over something like that. No matter how many times somebody might say, oh, just get over it. This was X number of months or years ago. You don't. You have to move on, but you don't get over it.
Yes. That's so true. So, part of what was really hard for me was my kids were, let's see, my oldest was 13, and then I had a 9-year-old daughter. So my oldest is son, 9-year-old daughter, 7-year-old son. My fourth turned 2 the next day or 2 days later, and then I had an 8-month-old.
Oh
And
my goodness.
so the 13-year-old went into total chaos. And that was probably the hardest
Wow.
um immediate kid situation to deal with, because he turned into a rage fest, and he coped with rage. And so we are all totally traumatized, and then we're dealing with constant rage. And when I say rage, I mean punching holes in the wall, breaking things, you know, screaming, so much screaming. I'm a yeller too, so I totally get it, but it was a lot. It was very difficult. And then my 9-year-old, who's 18 now, she kind of goes into herself. So she got really quiet and like really kind of withdrew in a lot of ways. And then my 7-year-old, he quit eating. He would only eat ramen noodles, nothing else, for like
Wow.
3 years. All he ate was like ramen noodles.
Wow.
And he needed a lot of hugs. So he would just come up and hug me. And I was homeschooling them. And so he would just like come up and hug me. Um, and then the two littles, they have what is really, I kind of call it delayed grief. Um, they were 4 and 5 years old before they started grieving. Um, and my older kids were a little bit impatient with them when they really started heavily grieving the loss of their dad. The older ones would be like, it's been 4 years. What's your problem? And I'm like, but not to them, right?
Right.
Not emotionally to them.
Yeah. As much as we all hate commercials, they are a necessary evil these days. That's what keeps the show on the air. You can show support by purchasing one of my mini books or donating through PayPal, or even just leaving a review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on. You can find the links for the books or donation options in the podcast description under the guest information. As always, a portion of the proceeds of everything made do go to local organizations that help fight human trafficking. Now back to the guest.
they say it takes 20 seconds in a hug to create endorphins in the body, the bonding hormone. And so I would literally hug my kids on purpose for 20 seconds. And like I would count in my head to make sure that I would hold them that long.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And well, thank you. And so it was very intentional. There was a lot of intentional things that I tried to do. They heard me cry. They heard me talk about him. I would ask them questions like, how are you? What's on your mind? Is there anything you need to process? And like, just try and give them an opportunity to say things. And I mean, in December it will be 9 years, and we're still processing still.
Right. Right. Your 13-year-old is now a young adult, you know?
He is 21. He'll be 22
Oh my goodness.
coming December.
Wow.
And he still struggles with, I want him to do EMDR therapy to try and filter some of what, his personality, he hangs on to things. And so we've been discussing a lot recently, like, you got to forgive. You have to let things go. Like, you can't ruminate on things that happened, years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And so even hard times like at school, he can hang on to that and he'll just like sit in that space. And so we're talking through a lot right now about like, you've got to filter those emotions and feelings and then let that go so that you're not carrying it with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great way of explaining what my life was like after I got out of trafficking for the first few years. I needed an outlet. EMDR was exactly what I needed all those years later to be able to release a lot of that stuff. And at that point, that's when I was able to write my book.
Yeah, because I bet with your experience, like, so much was done to you, right? That you might not have had control over, that it makes you feel like I have to vindicate this somehow.
Yeah.
But you can't. Like, there's no way to fix those things.
Right.
It's just a filtering.
Yeah. But being able to write about it, you give it a physical body that's separate from your own, and you can set it down on the shelf and walk away from it. And it's so much release. It's amazing.
Yes.
So, what all did you guys do to really be able to move through it for all of the healing? Did you go through any kind of counseling or therapy? Did you reach out to family members to be able to talk about stuff?
I did kind of all the above. So one of the things, and I actually have a book hopefully launching next month called The Death Tsunami, and it's my journey into widowhood. And so one of the things you don't realize is when you lose your significant other, that person that you filter your life with, right? You're like, hey, I forgot to pay the power bill and they're going to cut it off if we don't get it done. Or, hey, I need gas before I have my busy day tomorrow, whatever the simple thing is. Or like, hey, this terrible thing happened to me today, whatever it might be. You don't realize how those things will dam up on you if you're not filtering them out. So what I realized quickly after the loss of Jay was that my day in and day out was just damming up in my mind. And so I started journaling every day, and I just wrote to him the same way that I would talk to him, and just like, hey, the kids did this today, and, I stubbed my toe, and whatever you talk about the day in and the day out. And, so that was really helpful. I did 2 sessions of grief share. And if you have a loss, I cannot speak more highly of grief share. It was incredible. You can look them up online, like griefshare.org or something like that, and it'll tell you where meetings are. But there's actually workbook work that you go through, and it's like a support group basically for loss. And just getting in there and listening to their stories and the people just knowing that other people got it right
Yep.
was such a huge comfort, maybe. And the grief share, it goes through everything. It goes through suicide, it goes through murder, it goes through like long deal sicknesses, loss, it goes through immediate loss. It literally covers like any type of loss that you can have. So it's not just specifically for widows or widowers, like it covers full spectrum loss. And that was huge for
That
me.
is very cool. I probably could have used
And
something like that last year. I lost a dear friend. Wow.
yes, go through it now, even if it's been a year, because they talk about that delayed grief processing, right? Like sometimes we will shove out grief to not deal with it because it's so painful.
Right.
um you could probably still go through it and it would help you filter more stuff. It really was a huge gift.
I'll have to
And then
look
we
into that.
did there's a place here in Birmingham called Amelia Center that does loss counseling and like grief stuff, primarily geared toward children. And so my kids did that, and then I did a year with one of the counselors is there as well. So yeah, we did a lot of trying to filter.
Very cool. I love that you were able to find the resources available. Yeah, a lot of
Yes.
people don't know that these resources are available. I mean, we live in the age and the world of the internet, but a lot of people don't think to even look for that stuff. It's
Or they're
important to know.
scared.
Yeah.
They're scared. I think they're intimidated to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But these resources, I mean, definitely use them, and don't be afraid of it. If you don't talk, that's fine. Still go and get support.
Right. I tell people all the time being vulnerable is not a weakness, it is a strength. And that's why it's so hard to do. It's the same as asking for help.
Yes. Yes.
So you mentioned the book that
Absolutely.
you have coming out next month. You already have one book that's available right now called Believing in Boundaries. Can you tell me a little bit
Yes.
about this book? Why did you write it? What inspired you?
So it's really funny to me. If you had told me that I would write a book about boundaries, I think I would have laughed at you. Because first, I didn't even know what they were, like my whole life, right? So, I have to backtrack a little bit into my early adulthood. So, I married an alcoholic at 21 years old. Um, and I grew up with teetotaling parents. My parents never drank, never did drugs. Didn't smoke. I was never around any of that. None of my grandparents did. None of their friends did. So, um, when I started hanging out with punk rockers in my teen years and everybody was doing drugs and drinking, I just thought that was something like you grew out of. Like you would do it in your teen years, but then you just like grew out of it, right?
Right.
And I never got into drugs and alcohol. I did smoke cigarettes for a while, but personally, I never did. And so I didn't understand addiction and how it works and all that. So I married an alcoholic, and he beat me up when I was pregnant with my oldest son. And so I left him then, but I tried to work the marriage out for 2 years. I never lived with him again, but I was hoping that he would want to get help and that he would um, sober up and, maybe care about his family, but that didn't happen. And I had told God, I said, look, God, I made a vow and a covenant. If you want me to stay married to this man for the next 40 years of my life, that's what I'll do. But if you can find it in your grace and mercy, please deliver me from this marriage. And so it took 2 years before God delivered me from the marriage. And then God called me into my marriage with Jay, which is my husband that passed away. And about a year and a half into our marriage. So we got married in June of 04. We got pregnant 3 weeks later.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
honeymoon baby.
Uh-huh. And because of my domestic violence experience with my oldest son, I
Mm.
was terrified. I was absolutely terrified to be pregnant again with a man. You know what I mean? Like the vulnerability thing, right? I felt I didn't know. It scared me to death. And so I pushed him away. Um, and he had been a recovering addict. We had a relapse about a year and a half into our marriage.
Mm.
And um, it was about that time I started going to a group at the church we were at called Serenity, which was like an Al-Anon group, right? So it's for the family members and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics. And I went to learn how to fix him. Of course I did. And that was the first time I ever heard the term codependent.
Yeah.
And like, oh, maybe I'm the broken one here. I'm not the broken one. I have it all together. He's the broken one. Don't you see what a mess he is? Was kind of my thinking process, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to boundaries, was learning that I played a part in the addiction cycle, and that I played a part in my bad decisions, and that I played a part into the chaos in my life, and that I am responsible for me. And so 20 years later, birthed believing in boundaries. And that's kind of where my passion came from, is that boundaries have really been the crux of what has kept me thriving in chaos.
Wow. And I know you have a copy of your book there with you. Have you got a part of it that you'd like to read for us?
Yes.
I'm excited about your book. It's got a great cover too.
Thank
Can you hold that up for me real quick? Love that. I love that. It's if for the people who cannot see this, if you're only listening to it, check her book out. We're going to talk about where it's available here in just a moment, which is going to be her website. But this cover is so perfect, and it's very symbolic. It honestly is perfect. All right, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm going to shut up now.
No, thank you. I love it. Okay, I'm going to do chapter. I'll read some of it. Tell me if I'm going on too long, okay? Because it's a tiny chapter, but just let me know. Okay, so
Okay.
chapter 4, what are boundaries? Now that we've discussed where boundaries are necessary, answering the what question is critical. What are boundaries? Dictionary.com states that a boundary is something that indicates bounds or limits. The definition for bounds is a limit, something that restrains or confines. The use of the word limit is probably the reason most people don't practice boundaries or don't want to acknowledge them. In our culture today, there is a corruptive thought of free everything. We have free speech, we have free purchases, as in buy one, get one free, and we are constantly talking about free money and who should receive it. We are on the far side of the free love movement of the 1960s, but it seems that love became free or was given out too easily then, and we have never learned to rein it back in. Why would we want something that restrains, confines, or limits us? Good question. We have boundaries in our lives all the time. We appreciate those boundaries and understand the need for them. For example, our world has boundaries. We have land masses and ocean waters. We recognize that we can't just build cities on top of the ocean masses because, one, we would be completely destroying the habitat, and two, the water is more volatile than land. We settle ourselves within the boundaries of land because it is the safest and most logical place for us to build and grow our cultures. Then within each of those land masses, we have additional boundaries. We have continents, countries, states, provinces, counties, parishes, and cities. Of course, the smallest boundary that we have for our space is our very own home. Within your home, there are floors, walls, and ceilings that provide additional physical boundaries for safety, privacy, and protection. Your home may be large and vast, or it may be small and compact. But no matter, it is your home and you feel safe in it. You definitely do not want the boundaries of your home to be violated at any time. Likewise, we do not cross our neighbor's front door without an invitation into their home. When boundaries of countries are violated, countries often go to war. Why? Because maintaining that boundary is critical. When boundaries of a city are violated, the police are probably involved. When the boundaries of our home are violated, we look for ways to protect ourselves and others in our home. To violate a clear boundary line is often called an offense. After all, we feel offended when others have crossed our boundaries, although we didn't know that there was a line there. What are relationship boundaries? We can see the need to restrain and confine when it comes to outward territories, but what about the territory of our heart? Proverbs 4:23 tells us to guard our hearts with diligence because the springs of life flow from it. It is so important, critical really, that we guard our hearts, that we put boundaries around our hearts. For our heart flows the springs of life, and that is a poetic metaphor for our speech, our relationships, our behaviors. This helps us to navigate our life. If you look at much of our world today, you can see that relational boundaries are by far the hardest to maintain properly, and that we tend to get really messy in the relational department. So many families today have no lines at all to create healthy individuals. We have fathers who are absent, and so children aren't guided by their head of household. We have moms working their tails off and not able to invest in the life lessons kids need. We have grandparents raising their grandkids because their parents are too self-absorbed to do it. It is a mess. We understand boundaries in the physical context, and we understand the need to protect boundary lines. So why can't we do that with our relationships? Why does it feel like we are wrong to create definitive lines in relationships? It's because relationships are fluid. They feel much more like building a city on water than they do building it on solid ground. For instance, our relationships change over the years, even with the people we have known the longest. Some relationships get closer, but many disappear altogether. Heaven forbid that we are rejected, especially by our own merits, though it may not be our fault. When our hearts aren't guided by the safe boundaries that we need to definitively set into place, we tend to become a mess in the springs of life department. We have brokenness everywhere, and we allow offense to grow because we are unprotected. We may live in rocky waters, but we don't have to get taken down by them. We can create healthy boundaries for ourselves. You can create healthy boundaries for yourself. It is okay. It is necessary. It is healthy. I have one more little section. Am I okay? You want me to keep going?
You're good. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, just say no. The most common, well-respected, and pronounced boundary is the word no. No is a perfectly acceptable boundary and the beginning of all boundaries. Many people fear telling others no, but hopefully by the end of this book, you will feel much more comfortable with saying no to situations, thought processes, relationships, cultural issues, and faith practices that make you feel uncomfortable. No is a simple word, but it is very powerful. When you say no to someone or something, it does not mean that you are rejecting the person personally. It is not attack against the person, but a line stating what works for you. No, I will not get involved in that situation. No, I will not allow you to speak to me that way. No, I will not take you anywhere. No, I will not work on that project on my off time. No, I cannot travel this weekend. No, I will not be a classroom mom. Whatever you may need to say no to in order to keep your boundaries safe and healthy for yourself is important. Do not let the fear of others keep you from using this potent two-letter word, no. When you start establishing this boundary with others that are not used to it, they may be shocked or angry with you, but that does not change your answer. You can't let them push your boundary back because they are uncomfortable with your established boundary. Give yourself grace and time to learn to be comfortable with saying no to others. Just start with one no, but hold it. Do not give in no matter what. You can do it. Woo! Doesn't that feel good? I know you can make a better, safer future for you in your family by practicing setting boundaries and telling others no when you need to.
Oh, oh, that is so perfect. I remember the first time I set a boundary on no, you may not speak to me that way. I remember afterward, in the moment, I was terrified. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I
Yes.
just said that. He's going to knock my head off my shoulders. My heart is racing, heart palpitations everywhere. And I walked away. And when I was in a safe place, back at home with the doors locked, I sat down on the couch and I was grinning ear to ear, man. I was proud of myself. I had done it.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
There's so many people that
That's
could benefit
exactly
from your book.
right.
Yeah.
I
We need
coming
this.
from your background, right? Like setting boundaries, you totally get how boundary crossing can make you feel like you've done something wrong when you begin to set those boundaries, right?
Yep. I wasn't allowed to say no from the time I was 4 years old until I was in my late 30s, early 40s.
Yes, gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about having a huge learning curve to understand where you begin and where someone else begins, right? Or where
Yeah.
you end and someone else begins. Like, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you for doing that.
Me too. So,
Yes.
of course, your book is available on your website, which is thestephaniejordan.com. I'm going to make sure I put that website and your Instagram and your Facebook and all that stuff in the show notes so people can find you. And of course, I'm going to be following you and sending you a friend request because you're
Yay.
just amazing. But it has come to that
I'm
time of
so
the
glad that
show.
you have me
Me too. It's my favorite question time. My absolute most favorite question always. What is one thing that you love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
here. I love that I'm a spitball. I'm not a spitball, fireball. Um, Jay called it a wrecking ball, but I like that about me. Because I describe myself as indomitable moxie, and that means I don't give up. Like, I don't give up. I don't give in. I will fight. I am not the girlfriend that you want to come to for um soft squishy feelings. I'm the girl you want to come to when you're fighting hell and you need somebody to fight along with you. That's me. And I like that about me.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself. In short, this show really is all about the guest. If you've enjoyed their interview, please feel free to let them know. You can also tune in to the other podcast, Growth from Darkness, which is co hosted by a lovely lady from Australia. We talk about what trauma responses are and healthy ways to move beyond the past. For more information, just go to growthfromdarkness.com. Welcome to Season 5 of the podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Blackwood. A few years ago, I wrote my autobiography as a survivor of human trafficking. It's called Custom Justice. And I realized how many others had done the same thing as trauma survivors. Now it's my mission to uplift those voices and give hope to everyone that life does continue after trauma. Stories of hope live on.